Happy smiling faces to my left there. The Mercedes team 1-2 in the Australian Grand Prix, pretty much as expected based on what we saw in qualifying, based on what we saw in testing, but a fraught, almost traumatic race. Yes, definitely traumatic race if you're an Australian fan in Melbourne at Albert Park. And interesting to see there in that picture actually that Charles Leclerc doesn't look particularly happy. And I kind of sympathise with him, well I do sympathise with him because he was absolutely brilliant at the start and led the race for quite a long time, particularly when strategy calls came into play and Ferrari didn't bring him in on the first virtual safety car, which is a massive mistake, which is probably why he's not smiling. But beyond that, it's because it wasn't a racing driver's race, this. And I don't think any of them will be in 2026. I think that is the problem with the new regulations. I can imagine a lot of people out there now going on and on and on about there being 8 place changes in the first 8 laps of the race. But for me, that sort of thing is reserved for gaming. That is what computer games are all about. This is a Formula One Grand Prix in the Formula One World Championship with enormous heritage and with enormous gravitas throughout the world too. And I thought it was just ridiculous. None of the passes were genuine passes. They were all to do with power surges. The only good thing actually I thought about those first 8 laps was how absolutely stunning Charles Leclerc was when he was having to get offline to try to protect himself against a power surge from the Mercedes. And I thought that was just brilliant. Really, really impressive car control from Charles, and very, very brave to be where he was on various parts of the circuit. Indeed, very quick parts of the circuit. So that was good, but that wasn't, that isn't real motor racing, is it? Real motor racing is passing people under braking, and it's glorifying correctly the entry to the corner. And we didn't have any of that. This was all to do with managing the power. And it all began horrendously for Oscar Piastri when he lost on an outlap, going onto the grid on an outlap, not trying hard. He lost the rear on a curb coming out of turn 4. It was the left-hand part of turn 4. And he's on the curb, the right rear is on the curb. And suddenly he has 100 kilowatts of power that normally isn't there. Obviously the wheels just spin and just throw him into the wall on the inside. Interestingly, he also kept his hands on the wheel, no damage, but the car was really badly damaged, and that was it. Oscar Piastri, local hero, star of Australia, out of the Australian Grand Prix before it's even begun. So let's just draw up the tally there. It's Max Verstappen, Kimi Antonelli, and Oscar Piastri, 3 racing drivers who I think actually know what they're doing, all of whom are victim of these new cars. Now, whenever we say things like that in Formula One, oh, look at this guy, he won easily. You say, well, it's the same for everybody. Everybody's got the same regulations. Yeah, I agree with that. But they've changed so much. And this is such a radical change, unnecessarily so, in my opinion. What we have now is a very, very difficult car to manage in terms of power and how you're going to use the power. And we saw all that. And we saw the commentators around the world trying to do the best job they could of explaining how one car would be going slower here and another could go faster there. But it's not motor racing to have to do that. That's the first point. And secondly, if they hadn't got rid of the MGUH, as far as I can understand it, none of this would be an issue. None of this would be a problem because they'd be generating energy correctly so from the front axle as well. And I just do not understand why they did. Well, that's incorrect. I do understand. It was because Audi said we don't want MGUH in the regulations, otherwise we won't come into Formula One. Well, tough. Formula One had done a very, very good job of nurturing MGUK and MGUH, nomenclature that nobody had ever heard of, really, apart from the experts, before Formula One introduced it in 2014. And now, glibly, it's just thrown out MGUH, a critical part of what made the electrified cars, if that's the right word, relatively normal to drive. And now we've got rid of that. But of course, there is another side to this, and that is that if the motor racing world imploded tomorrow, and all we were doing was racing wheelbarrows, then the racers would be out there racing wheelbarrows. So whatever it is, let's get out and race and let's not complain. That's fine in itself, but you have to see it in the context of Formula One having grown to where it is today and making such radical changes. I mean, when we went to groove tyres, I thought that was completely ridiculous as well, but it was just one element. And everything else kind of worked around it. And yeah, it was seen after a while to be completely ridiculous, even though Max Mosley never apologized for doing that. And so we went back to normal tires again. But in 2026, the change of the power unit is so fundamental that it makes a nonsense, I think, of the sport, particularly with all the other things we're changing as well. And I don't buy the 8 place changes in 8 laps success story, because it was just a blur of well, I don't know what it was. It was computer gaming. That's all it was. It wasn't real motor racing. And it was very, very fortunate we didn't have a start line shunt. Not really covered by the cameras, but you can see it on the replays on the super slow-mo, is Liam Lawson making a very slow start in the other Racing Bulls V-carb. And behind him, Franco Colapinto, I don't know what speed he's going at this point, but as you can see from this snapshot we've done just after the start, you can see some cars still in first gear, some in second, but it's all an exact moment in time. And at that specific instant, Liam Lawson is doing 43, obviously with some sort of battery or power problem. And Colapinto, much further back on the grid, is doing 125. And so you can imagine the speed differential there. Just interesting looking at that snapshot at the different speeds and how much variation there is. This is what we were talking about in the build up to the race. Just go through it. George Russell, so he's on the pole, he's on the clean side of the grid. He's already in second gear at this snapshot moment, 119. Kimi Antonelli on the dirty side of the grid, still in first gear. He's got a lot of wheel spin. Maybe it's because he's in first gear, 109. So big differential there. Isack Hadjar doing a very good job, already in third, maybe short shifting up to third to get that sort of speed, 139, very quick amongst the front runners. Charles Leclerc, very good, but 108, not instantly quick off the line, but very good once he gets into the intermediate gears. Lando Norris, 146 in third gear. Yeah, very good from Lando. Lewis Hamilton, fastest of all, 162, when George Russell's still doing 119. I mean, that is unheard of, that difference in terms of a normal race start. But welcome to 2026. And it should also be noted that Lewis did that from the dirty side of the grid. And then you got Lawson in trouble there in first gear, 43 kilometers an hour in the middle of the pack almost. Arvin Lindblad doing a very good job, 124 in second gear. Gabriel Bortoleto, 112. Not bad for the Audi in his first start. Oliver Behrman, a little bit slow, probably a bit too much wheel spin. Also having to take avoiding action of Liam Lawson, still in first gear at 100. Ocon 147 alongside him, so big difference there in speed. Pierre Gasly 143, pretty good for the Alpine Mercedes. Alex Albon, good in the Williams 2. There's Colapinto 125, about to confront the Liam Lawson car. Fernando Alonso, not too bad either, off the line in the Aston Martin Honda 125. And Sergio Perez, look at that, in the Cadillac Ferrari 142 in third gear. So Sergio knows what he's doing when it comes to controlling the back end of the car. Very, very good. Quicker than Valtteri, 137, and giving a good demonstration. Oliver Behrman to one side, bearing in mind he did make a slowish start and was then in trouble with the slow Liam Lawson car. How good that Ferrari power unit and drivetrain is off the line on the customer cars as well. Max 126 with a battery problem off the line in second gear, so that's where some of his early race pace disappeared to. Carlos Sainz very quick in the Williams, 158, and finally Lance Stroll 120. So Colapinto showing great judgment and car control, you got to say. Goes between Lawson and the pit wall with an opposite lock slide. I mean, it was unbelievably lucky for him, obviously not to hit anything, and equally for Lawson not to be hit. And then we had retirements as well. I mean, a key retirement was Isack Hadjar, who was looking pretty good in the Red Bull. He qualified third yesterday, as we know, and he'd made a bit of a tardy start, but he was starting to make up ground quite well. Probably would have been there in the mix, P4, something like that, and the engine just blew. Whether it was, I don't know, whether it was whatever pressure went, smoke out the back, just lost everything. That's okay. That's motor racing. We've seen that. That's good old school motor racing, you could say. But we did have, not too long ago, we had an incredible Formula One with amazing rock solid reliability. I'm referring, of course, to V8s and V10s. But so, as I've said a million times on this channel, and this will be the end of my rant at the beginning of this video, because we'll get onto some detail. As I've said a million times on this channel, what should have happened is that Formula One in 2014 should have adopted Formula E, should have created its own Formula E. It should have been part of the Formula One race card every weekend. The Formula One team should have been seen to be doing for electric technology, automotive technology. But Formula One itself should have remained what it was. It should have remained V8s, V10s, should have been normal motor racing. And all of the questions about is Formula One keeping pace with E-technology would have been answered by everything that Formula One was doing for its own Formula E. That's what should have happened. And it didn't happen because Bernie Ecclestone and Jean Todt decided to go their separate ways. They had a big split after Bernie had helped Todd become FIA president, and Todd went off on his own and launched Formula E. And that was the beginning of all of the drama we're now seeing in Formula One with these ridiculously compromised cars. And it's very sad, I think, to see great Grand Prix drivers looking like idiots, making ridiculous mistakes under braking or under power. But we know why they're happening. I explained in detail why I think Max lost it yesterday. And we know why Oscar Piastri went off in his home Grand Prix, going onto the grid. 100 kilowatts of extra power when you suddenly don't want it up on a curb when you're not even trying hard. I mean, give me a break. It's difficult to imagine how they could have seen this as a step forward for Formula One. Anyway, the job is to report the wheelbarrow race. And so we will report the wheelbarrow race. And it was a very, very good win for those smiling faces you can see there. The Mercedes team, very, very good job, particularly by George Russell, who got a bit flustered at one point with everything Charles was doing to try to keep the lead. And every time George got a power surge, for a while, not every time, 2 or 3 times, George got a power surge out of, say, 11, contrary to presumably what they'd agreed in the driver's briefing, as George had said. Which was, if there's a power surge there, don't make it difficult to pass into the next one. Of course, Charles did make it difficult because it's Charles Leclerc, for Pete's sake, in a Ferrari in Australia. And so there was Charles on the dirt, on the loose, and doing what he did. But ultimately, it came down to, guess what? Another poor strategy call by Ferrari, because it was a virtual safety car when Hadjar's engine blew on lap 12. At that point, it was still Charles Leclerc in front, George Russell behind him, then Lewis Hamilton, then Kimi Antonelli. And Ferrari leading the race, you could argue it's a slightly more difficult choice when there's a virtual safety car, whether to come in or not. George presumably saw Charles staying out and came in straight away. So did Kimi Antonelli. They did a stack stop, did pretty well with it. Both Ferraris stayed out. Lewis got on the radio straight away to say one of us should have come in. Why did we both stay out like that? We should have split our options. In my opinion, I didn't think there was any decision to be made whatsoever. I don't understand why Ferrari didn't bring both drivers in exactly as both Mercedes drivers were brought in, because the only downside would have been George not coming in then and staying out, getting track position. But it wouldn't have made a lot of difference because Ferrari would have had new tyres. They would have been in good shape. They would have been given their free pit stop. So I don't understand. I mean, Lewis obviously makes a very good point about splitting the options if they're uncertain. But in my opinion, that both Ferraris should have been brought in straight away. I just don't understand. It's a classic example. Well, it's a good example, actually, despite everything that's going on in Formula One at the moment with all the regulation changes. Some things never change, and that is the Ferrari strategy calls. And the funniest part of this race, not that there were many funny parts anyway, but a funny part of the race, I thought, was right at the end of that VSC period when both Ferraris came out of the last corner, the second last corner, as slowly as they possibly could, in the hope that Ferrari were going to suddenly say, yeah, come in, change tyres. And Lewis almost ground to a halt, hoping that call would be made. And the drivers should do it, take the initiative and come in on their own. But presumably at Ferrari, they have some protocol there that prevents them doing it. I'm not sure that protocol will last for much longer. But I thought it was quite funny to see how slow they would. Please give me the call. Because that was the point at which Ferrari effectively then lost the Australian Grand Prix. Because, there were some other virtual safety cars. Ferrari ignored those as well and brought both drivers in ultimately under full race conditions, which is how they got beaten. They were not that far away from the Mercs as far as we could see. But then again, we don't know how much margin George was probably playing with. I would imagine a massive amount. And so I don't think we should read too much into that. And Charles Leclerc, just brilliant into the first corner to take the lead. George, I think, was kind of ready for that and seemed relatively serene, but it got a little bit frenetic within those 8 laps and passing and repassing. And then, of course, it was settled by this whole business of the strategy call or the lack of strategy call on lap 12. But Lewis Hamilton also very good off the line and was in a position to kind of be up in the top 3, but then had to back away to avoid the traffic. Another very good car off the line was Arvin Lidblad in the other Racing Bulls, or in the Racing Bulls, did very well and was right up in the top 3. And again, a little bit game show, but no decrying Arvid's driving this weekend. Just superb to see him on his debut, aged 18, driving as well as he has, and eventually finishing in the points too. So good, very good result for him. P4, Lewis Hamilton, very good drive by Lewis. Towards the end of the race, his tyres were in slightly younger than 3 laps younger than Charles, and he was closing on Charles. But Charles very good under that pressure as well. There's no way he was going to blow it at that point. So Lewis finished a strong 4th. So that'll be a good way. He'll feel good about this race, I think. And he's probably feeling pretty good about the regulations because there's a lot of power oversteer control. There's a lot of it doesn't really matter what you do into the corner. It's all about the exit of the corner. Just make sure you harvest enough energy going in. And that kind of suits Lewis quite well where he is with his driving now, in that he still obviously is extremely good from rotation point to full exit, to full power. And where he was losing ground to Charles into corners has kind of been neutralized by the importance of that part of the lap now being used purely to harvest power. So it's kind of helped Lewis, I think, there to get a little bit nearer to Charles with his driving. P5 Lando Norris, who made a good start, but then lost a lot of time and speed and momentum coming out of turn 2. Lando a little bit going nowhere for much of the race. And his tyres went off quite quickly as well. He started on the mediums, as did most of the key runners, apart from Max, who obviously started on the hard tyre because he's at the back of the grid, against all predictions from Pirelli, who didn't even have starting on the hard tyre as one of their possible race strategies. But anyway, that's what Max chose. And he did very well on the hard tyre. But anyway, we'll get on to Max in a second. And Lando was going round and round and round. But eventually, when Max was in his mirrors, and now on his second set of mediums, Lando choosing to run a two-stop strategy, he started to drive really well. And it was a very good battle. And Max actually, he got within the required 1 second coming out of the last corner, after which he would then get his overtake boost and all the rest of it. But he was still unable to do anything about the McLaren and eventually finished 6th. And I think, again, that the Red Bull strategy was questionable because he stayed out correctly and gained track position when his teammate Isack had that engine failure on lap 12. But then 6 laps later, when Valtteri Bottas stopped in the Cadillac, there was another virtual safety car and Max came in. And I was amazed that they did that. I can't imagine that his hard tyres would have gone off that much at that point, bearing in mind that was 18-lap stint. And bearing in mind, the one-stop runners who'd started on medium were doing something like 46 laps on the hard tyre. And yet they brought Max in and put him on the medium, on which he didn't go that well. And their tyres went off quite quickly and then back on the hard tyre again. So it was a two-stop strategy with quite a lot of questions about the tyre management of the Red Bull RB17, yet therefore to be answered. Early indications from the team is that there was a surprising amount of graining on the hard tyre, but even so, whether it was more than other teams were suffering remains to be seen. P7, really good drive by Oliver Behrman. Had some very fraught moments with his teammate, with Pierre Gasly and various others, but eventually pulled away from them all, Lindblad too, and to finish 7th. Excellent drive. As we said yesterday, it's a little bit disappointing in qualifying, but wow, didn't they do a good job in the race. Esteban Ocon finished 11th in the other car. Arvid was 8th, stellar drive in the Racing Bulls. 9th, I mean, we've been criticising Audi for forcing Formula One into getting rid of the MGUH, but here they are in the points with their first race, 9th with Gabriel Bortoleto. Very good drive. Very, very good drive by Gabriel. He's really looking to be a real star of the future. Excellent performance from him. 9th in the Audi. And remember, of course, that is a brand new engine as well, like the Red Bull powertrain Ford. And 10th, Pierre Gasly, making up a little bit, again, for dramas with Alpine. Didn't have a massive amount of downforce or grip, but classic Pierre Gasly, aggressive drive, maximising the car, finished 10th for Alpine Mercedes. Honourable mentions should be given to Sergio Perez, who drove very well in the Cadillac, I thought, and was in the sort of back of the midfield pack for a while, doing pretty well. And Fernando Alonso, who started on soft tyres, which is a pretty good indication of we're not going to go very far in this race. But he was there or thereabouts with the sort of backpack as well in the Aston Honda. And at least they put on a slightly better show than I guess some people had predicted. And the car, obviously, I still think, obviously, it's not bad at all. Probably a very good car. They just need to get the battery problem solved. So I'm going to continue to be enthusiastic about Formula One, to be enthusiastic about drivers and what they can do in the cars. As I said yesterday in the qualifying video, if you take everything that's going on at the moment in isolation, it is amazing how quickly these cars can be driven around one lap of any given circuit, given how small the power is now from the internal combustion engine and how much electric power it has and how it's recharging itself over one lap. That is a technical achievement. Anyway, thanks for watching. Congratulations to Mercedes for the job they've done. Far better than anybody else in this very difficult technical formula. And see you again at the back end of this week when we do our 3 regular videos from the Chinese Grand Prix. We'll be doing a live stream midweek too. And I think I'm talking to Cameron on Monday. That'll be fun. Anyway, take care, stay safe, see you soon.